Hey, Cheve, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Zayin of Masechta Sukkah, Daf 7 of Masechta Sukkah. Cheve, Eruvin called. They're going to hijack Daf Zayin and Daf Ches of Masechta Sukkah, and apparently there's not much that I can do to save you. So, I'm sorry. But no, I'm just kidding. Well, to an extent. Eruvin did call, and they are hijacking Daf Zayin and Ches, but we like Eruvin, right? Obviously, we love Eruvin. Alright, let's go weiter. So, so we're continuing our discussion towards the end of that. Right, well, yesterday we were talking about Shtayim Kilchoson v'Shlishis Afilu Tefach, that you need two walls, like two proper walls, and the third one can even be a Tefach, so we're going to discuss where exactly is that Tefach. That's an interesting discussion. Along the way, we're going to sort of pull out all of the stuff that we know from Masechta Eruvin, like Lavud, like Paretz Mubala Omed, Omed Mubala Paretz, things like Pase Beiraos, Mavoy Amafula, Shlechi, all of these exciting sugyas from Eruvin Mamish, just like concentrated into one daf of Masechta Sukkah. So that's kind of exciting. And then at the end, we're going to talk a shtickle about Dir Askeva, and at the very end we're going to just get a taste for what we're going to discuss tomorrow, which is a round sukkah, which sounds exciting, but it's not. It's very technical. Remember circles and squares and yanim like that. So this is mamish where we're at for the next 2 days. Let's go weiter. 3 lines from the bottom. That tefach, where do you put it? So, right, if we said that a sukkah needs to have 2 and a tefach, right? The walls of a sukkah need to be 2 walls plus a third wall that's just a tefach. So where is that tefach? Where is that tefach? Meaning if you have 2 walls, so it's an L shaped. Now where is the third wall? So Amar Rav, Mamido Keneged Ayotze. So says Rav, you put it by the exit. What does that mean? So Rashi says what it means is that on one end of the L. So Keilu, meaning, obviously, if it was like 4 walls, it would be a square, right? Imagine if it's 3 walls, so you probably have like a U. If you only have 2 walls, so you have like an L. So choose one side of the L and then build, it's kind of just the third wall will just be 1 tefach. So instead of building a third complete wall, you just build the first tefach of it, and that's that. And you can choose whichever wall you want to, let's say imagine the wall, you have a southern wall and an eastern wall, so you can make that one sort of at the end of the eastern wall going east towards from the east towards the west, or you can put it on the sort of corner of the southern wall going south to north, the first tefach. I hope I got that right. Well, that's the idea. Okay, so you just like the third wall, you just get it started at tefach. Okay. Amlev Kahana Rav Asi Rav. So this was interesting, because on the one hand, Rav Kahana and Rav Asi were kind of students of Rav. So I was like, why would Rav Kahana and Rav Asi be replying to Rav? And then I was like, remember there was a Gemara in Shabbos, which actually we said, I think maybe Rashi said, that Rav Kahana and Rav Asi were actually Talmud Chavers of Rav. So they're almost like contemporaries of Rav. So anyways, I'm the Rav Kahana of Rav Asi the Rav. So then Rav Kahana and Rav Asi responded to Rav, V'amidenu keneged Rosh Tor. So the way that Rashi explains it is it's basically put it on a diagonal. So we were saying, I'm just going to give one possibility. So let's say you have a southern wall and you have an eastern wall, and then you were going to get started with the first tefach going from the south to the north on the western wall. Okay, if you're following me on that. So Rav says that you just make it, straight. East, west. No, south, north. Right? Meaning if you're going to start building the western wall, so you build the western wall going south-north. Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Right? Yeah, of course. That's correct. Of course. Yeah. The western wall, the wall that's on the west, meaning on the left side, is going to be going north-south. That's correct. What do you want me to tell you? Okay. So you basically build it straight. So Rav Kahana and Rav Asi are suggesting that maybe it's not straight. Maybe you almost build it like a triangle. Right? So meaning you have 2 walls, and then maybe the third wall, instead of just going straight, maybe you put on an angle so that it's taka facing like the diagonal corner. That's their suggestion. Shosik Rav. Rav was quiet. He didn't have an answer, seemingly. Itmar Nami Omer Shmuel. Shmuel says like Rav, Mishmei de Levi, in the name of Levi, Mamido Keneged Yotze, that you put it next to, sort of not on a diagonal, but rather straight, kind of like Rav suggested. V'chein morin be'midrashim Mamido Keneged Yotze. And also in the Beis HaMedrash, they teach it like that, which is that you put it straight, you don't put it on a diagonal. Not like Rav Kana and Rav Asi. Rav Simon v'itemer Rav Yeshua ben Levi Omar, says Rav Simon, some takas say it was Rav Yeshua ben Levi. Osilo tefach shochek, so you take epis a tefach, taka a shtika more than a tefach, uma'amido b'pachis mishlosha tfachim samuch lidofen v'chol pachis mishlosha samuch lidofen kilavu dami. Ooh, wow. That is juicy. Let's read that again. Reb Simon v'itemer Reb Yeshua ben Levi Amar, says Reb Simon, some taka says Reb Yeshua ben Levi, osilo tefach shochek. So you chop a shtickle wall that is a little bit more than a tefach. Okay, fine. Uma'amido b'pachis mishlosha tfachim, and you put this wall not touching either of the two sides. I mean, you have two walls. The third wall isn't touching, right? So again, going back to what I was saying earlier, let's say you have a southern wall and an eastern wall, and you're going to build the western wall. So you don't put it touching the southern wall. Rather, you distance it slightly less than 3 tefachim away from the southern wall. And the width of this one tefach wall isn't actually a tefach, it's slightly more than a tefach, kilu, to make up for the slightly less than 3 tefachim of lavud. And then in total, you put this slightly more than a tefach wall with it, slightly less than 3 tefachim away from the southern wall in my example, which means that in total, you basically have a wall that's 4 tefachim. Now the minimum size of a sukkah is Rosh Rubav Shulchan, which is 7 tefachim by 7 tefachim. So be'etzem, by taking this a shtickle more than 1 tefach wall and putting it a shtickle less than 3 tefachim from the southern wall, so a shtickle less than 3 plus a shtickle more than 1 is, in my kind of funny little math, is 4. I think anyways. So 4 out of 7 is a majority of the way to 7. Wow. Okay, let's go weiter. Fine, so mishlosha tvachim samuch ledofen, so you put it within 3 tvachim of the wall, v'chol pachos mishlosha samuch ledofen kilav dami. And as long as it is within 3 tvachim of the, in my example, the southern wall, so then it would be considered lavud, and therefore it's all considered, solid, and you have a 4 tefach solid wall, which is more than halfway of the way towards the 7 tefach size of a sukkah. So you have 2, essentially now what you have is, you have 2 walls that are at least 7 tefachim, and you have a third wall that is 4 tefachim halachically, which is, the majority of the way. So you have 2 walls and a third one that's like a majority of a wall. Amar Rav Yehuda, says Rav Yehuda, Sukkah asuya kimavui. If you have a sukkah, that's like a mavui. Now obviously you're all thinking, what kind of mavui? Mavui mefulash, mavui sasum. The answer is a mavui mefulash. Okay, so if you have an open mavui, a mavui that you got one chutzner on the right, one chutzner on the left, they open up into a shared space and you can walk right through the shared space. So it's a mavui mefulash. Okay, now a mavui mefulash, there's a wall on either side and you can walk straight through from one side to the other. You got Rishus Harabim on either side of the mavui. You can walk straight from one Rishus Harabim to the other Rishus Harabim through the mavui, but there's a wall on either side, right? You're walking through this like alleyway. So there's 2 walls, be'etzem. So so we're trying to figure out, okay, is it possible to just put schach on top of the mavui? So kishera. So it's kosher. Meaning, what does it mean? You need 3 walls for a sukkah. So what you do is you basically just take a tefach, right? We said shtaim kilchasim v'shlishis afilu tefach. So you have the 2 walls of the mavui, and you just take one wall that's a tefach long, v'oso tefach mamido l'chorach sheyirtze, and put that tefach wall wherever you want. You have 4 options, right? You can put it on, on one side, on either wall. You can put it on the other side, on either wall. So that is this Mavui situation. Rabbi Simon v'item Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Omar says Rabbi Simon, some Taka says Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Oselo pas arba v'mashu. What you do is you take a strip that is taka a shtickle more than 4 tfachim. Umamido bepachos mishlosha samuch l'dofen, and put it within 3 tfachim of the wall. So again, you take a wall that's a shtickle more than 4 tfachim, and you put it within 3 tfachim of whichever wall you want to close off for your sukkah. And if it's within 3 tfachim of the walls, it's like lavud. So in this case, you mamish have a wall. Meaning, if we're saying that a wall needs to be 7 tfachim, this is mamish 7 tfachim. You have this wall that's a little bit more than 4 tfachim. You're leaving it within 3 tfachim, slightly less than 3 tfachim of one of the walls. So it's mamish, with lavid, that's mamish 7 tfachim, which is like a proper wall. Meaning, so you have this mavei amefulash, 2 wall, a wall on either side, so you have 2 walls, and then you construct this 7 tefach wall by using a board, some kind of wall that is a little bit more than 4 tefachim, and leaving it within 3 tefachim of the wall. So the Maisa, using lavid, it's 7 tefachim, it's a proper wall. So the Gemara wants to know, 1 second. A minute ago, when it came to a regular sukkah, we said that, Rabbi Simon says in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, take a wall that is slightly more than 1 tefach, put it within 3 tefachim of whichever, wall you're going to be putting it next to, and, essentially 1 tefach plus 3 tefachim, a little more than 1 tefach, and a little bit less than 3 tefachim is 4 tefachim, which is the majority of the way to a wall. How come over here by the mavui amefulash, you mamish need to construct a real 7 tefach wall, right? You use a wall that's a little bit more than 4 tefachim, put it within 3 tefachim of the wall, using lava that's mamish 7 tefachim, which is a proper wall. So answered the Gemara, Hasam Dika Shtei Defanas Kilchason Sagile Tefach Shochik. That in the other example, in the first example where you have 2 walls that are mamish touching, so the third wall can even just be, within 3 tefachim, and, it's a majority of the way to the wall. But in the second one, right, so Sagile B'Tefach Shochik, Hacha, but over here by the Mavei Amefulash, the lekashtei defanos, where you don't have 2 walls that are touching each other. You have an opened alley where it's not closed at all. So yi'ika pasar ba in ilolo, that if you have a strip that's 4 tefachim that you could put within 3 tefachim and then kilu make proper wall of 7 tefachim, so then it would work because it's in a mavoi amefulash. But in the first case, where you already have 2 walls that are touching each other, so it's enough if you just kind of like using love would make majority of the wall. Omar Rava. Now says Rava ve'enaniteres ele b'tzuras haPesach, and says Rava that third wall mamish needs to have a tzuras haPesach. Tzuras haPesach. I forgot about that in the intro. Tzuras haPesach as well comes up. Mamish everything. It's like you learn this daf, you basically it's a eruv and cotton. Anyways, so says Rava that when you have these 2 walls. So you have, going back to my fakakta example, which hopefully is more clarifying than confusing. But if you have a wall in the south and a wall to the east, okay? So when we say that you could have a tefach to the west, so it means that tefach on the third wall, on the western wall, ki'ilu, it needs to be a tzuras haPesach, right? Remember we had said in Eruvin that a tzuras haPesach is mamish a proper wall. Right, so basically what you do is when we say that the third wall could be even a tefach, it's a tzuras haPesach. So basically, if you take the tefach and you divide it in half, and then like at one wall, so like the southern part of the western wall, you kind of put up like one board that's like one wall that's a half a tefach, and then at the far end you put up another part of the wall that's half a tefach, and then on top you put like another kind of beam going from on top of one to on top of the other. So right, we said tzuras haPesach is kana mikan v'kana agabein. Right, so if you make a tzuras haPesach, you take half a tefach and you put it, at this corner, and then another half a tefach and you put it at the other corner, and then you take some kind of board or beam or something, and you put it from one to the other. That's a tzuras haPesach, says Rava. That this third wall that is just a tefach, it dafka has to be constructed as a tzuras HaPesach. Alright. Those who say that Rava says, no, that it can also be used as a tzuras HaPesach. You have two options. Either you could do it, so Rashi says you could do it like Reb Simon suggests, that you take a tefach, shtickle more than a tefach, and put it within 3 tefachim of the wall, right? And then that's your third wall, the majority of the way, basically a 4 tefach wall, because using lavud. So Rashi explains that Rav is suggesting that either you could do it like Reb Simon, or if you want instead, alternatively, you could do it tzuras HaPesach, right? So again, the first way that we explained Rava is that tefach needs to be divided in 2 and made into like a tzuras HaPesach situation. The other way to explain Rava is that no, if it could also be a tzuras HaPesach, like either or. Finally, there are those who say Rava utzricha nami tzuras HaPesach, that taka you need both of them. That kilu, it's not enough just to do like Reb Simon says, that you take a pillar or something that's a little more than 1 tefach and put it within 3 tefachim of the wall. No. That's not enough. You need that, and then you also need a tzuras HaPesach. You have to put a board on top of it and make like a tzuras HaPesach. You need both. So 3 ways to understand Rava. One of them is to say that either you could do it like Reb Simon, or you could do it as a tzuras HaPesach. The other one is that the first way to say is you have to do it like a tzuras HaPesach. The other one is to say no, you could do like either a tzuras HaPesach or like Reb Simon. The third one is to say no, you have to do it like Reb Simon, but also make it a tzuras HaPesach. All right, Chevre Erevin. All right. Rav Ashi Ashkele Rav Kahana de Ka'avid Tefach Shochik v'Ka'avid Tzuras HaPesach. So Rav Ashi found Rav Kahana who was doing like the final explanation of Rava, right? That he was doing like Reb Simon, that there was a 1 tefach and was within 3 tefachim of the wall, but he was also doing a Tzuras HaPesach. Omar Le, so Rav Ashi says to Rav Kahana, didn't you hear what Rava says, that you can use tzuras HaPesach, but you don't have to use both? You could use either or. If you want, you could do Reb Simon, or if you want, you could do a tzuras HaPesach, but you don't have to do both. So Omar Le, so if Kahana responds, I hold like the other explanation of Rava, that he says that you have to also do it tzuras HaPesach, that it's not enough just to do like Reb Simon, that to put a little bit more than 1 tefach within 3 tefachim of the wall, but you have to, in addition to that, also make a tzuras HaPesach and kind of put a vertical beam on one, have the tefach and a little bit more within 3 tefachim of it, and then another beam on top, make also tzuras HaPesach. Alright, sounds very nice. Okay, now the Gemara continues. Shtaim kil chasan v'chulei Omer Rabba. So the Gemara Taka says Rabba, but the Abagosabach changed it to Rabba. I kind of like it better as Rabba, but Rashi seems to be assuming it's Rabba. Chev, what should we do? I'm going to go with Rabba. Omer Rabba v'chein l'Shabbos. Migo dahavya dofen le'inyon sukkah havya dofen le'inyon Shabbos. Chev, do you hear that? We learned Masechta Erevin. We know that to create a Reshus HaYachid for Shabbos, you have to have 3 walls. We also said that to create a sukkah, you need 3 walls, but halach l'Moshe Misinai, that third wall could just be a tefach. Now for Shabbos, that doesn't work. You have to have mamash 3 proper walls. We know about that, right? Omin mubala parutz, or tzuras HaPesach, or kilu. We know about these inyonim. So it has to be a proper wall. Now obviously a 1 tefach wall is not a proper wall. But it says Rabbah that on Shabbos of Sukkot, if let's say your sukkah is right next to your house, so your house is of course your Reshus HaYachid, and right next to your house is your sukkah, but now you constructed your sukkah in such a way that it's only 2 walls and the third one's only a tefach, so be'etzem, it's not a Reshus HaYachid l'gabe Shabbos. But says Rabbah that since the sukkah is a kosher sukkah and it's good enough to be a sukkah, it's also good enough to be a Reshus HaYachid on Shabbos, and you can carry in there. If you have things in the sukkah, you can carry them Dalet Amos in the sukkah, no problem. So again, Omer Rabba says Rabba v'chein the Shabbos, that, and also this 2 and a tefach structure is considered a Reshus HaYachid. Not only is it considered a kosher sukkah, it's considered a Reshus HaYachid. Since it's a kosher wall, since this one tefach wall is kosher legabe sukkah, havidofen l'inyan Shabbos, it will also be considered a kosher wall le'inyan Rishus HaYachid on Shabbos. Eis ve'Abai. Abai asks a kasha on Rabbah. Umyamrinon migo? Chever. Do we really say migo? Do we say this concept of migo, of since? That since it's a good wall for Sukkah, so memele it's also a good wall for Shabbos on Sukkah, on Sukkahs. Frekta Abai, umyamrinon migo? Do we really say migo? Ve'otanya. But we learn in the Brisa, Dofin Sukkah, Kidofin Shabbos, that the wall of the Sukkah is like a wall of Shabbos. Uvilvad, shloye ben karne lachver shlosha tvachim. So meaning, what does this mean? It means that just like on Shabbos, in order for a wall to be a wall, there has to be less than 3 tvachim between like the bunch of reeds. So let's say you wanted to make like a fancy wall on Shabbos. So one way you can make a fancy wall is you take reeds and you place them within 3 tvachim of each other. So now it's parutz merubeh ala omed in a certain sense, right? If you look at the wall, there's certainly more space than there is matter, than there is reed. It's a thin little reed and you're just spacing them within 3 tvachim of each other, so it's mostly space. But because they're within 3 tvachim of each other, so then memele, we say lavud, and it's a full wall. It's a solid wall as far as we're concerned. And that applies whether it's vertical reeds or whether they're horizontal, right? As you know, I'm sure some people have noticed that there are sukkahs that some people on their sukkahs, maybe you've noticed this and you wondered why, but some people on their sukkahs, they have like these straps going around the bottom of the sukkah. The reason for those straps going around the bottom of the sukkah, or maybe if you haven't noticed them in the past, maybe you'll notice them this year, is because of lavud. That the reason why people have straps around their sukkah at the bottom for the first 10 tvachim is because they're constructing a halachic lavud wall. That you have one strap, and then within 3 tvachim you put another strap on top of it, and then 3 tvachim on top of that you put another strap, and then so then memele, even if you have like a fabric wall that might blow in the wind or whatever it is, you know that you have a halachic wall with these straps that are surrounding the bottom of the sukkah within 3 tvachim of each other, so you have a solid lavud wall for the first 10 tvachim of the sukkah. So now, so says Abai, we have a brisa that says, Dofin sukkah kedofin Shabbos, that when we're talking about, the construction of a wall for a sukkah, it has the same halachas of the construction of a wall for Rishus HaYachid on Shabbos, meaning, that you have to make sure that between each reed, there is less than 3 tvachim. Now, continues the brisa and says, V'yiseira Shabbos shel sukkah, but nonetheless, Shabbos is more stringent than sukkah. In what sense? Shabbos eino niteres ele ba'omed meruba al aparutz. Masha ein kein b'sukkah. Let's do that again. Shabbos eino niteres ele ba'omed meruba al aparutz. That on Shabbos, we know from Masechta Eruvin that a wall is only considered kosher ba'omed meruba al aparutz. One of the halachas by a wall for Shabbos, for Eruvin, for mechitzas, is that it has to be omed meruba al aparutz. There has to be more wall than gap. If you have more space in the wall than you have wall in the wall, so that's not going to work for Shabbos. Masha ein kein b'sukkah, which is not the case by sukkah. Rashi explains, and I think we're going to get to it in more detail, the walls and how much space you can have and stuff later. But even if you have more space, even if you work it out, that it happens to be that using the doors and entrances and stuff, there happens to be more space than there is wall, that could still work when it comes to a sukkah. I think we're going to get into more detail later. My love. And now says Abaye, what does this mean? It means Yisera Shabbos this sukkah, a sukkah. Abaye wants to understand that what does it mean Yisera? What does it say? V'Yisera Shabbos al sukkah. What does it mean that Shabbos is more stringent than Sukkot? So Abaye wants to say what this means is Yisera Shabbos this sukkah a sukkah. That on Shabbos of Sukkot, when you have two things at play here, you have the halachas of Hotzah on Shabbos, and you also have the halacha of what's considered a kosher sukkah. They're different. They're not the same. Yisera Shabbos the Sukkah, that on Shabbos Sukkos, Shabbos is more stringent than the Sukkah is. In what sense? In the sense that the Sukkah only needs to be 2 walls and a tefach, and that's a kosher Sukkah. If you eat in there, if you sleep in there, you're yotzei the mitzvah of Sukkah, but it won't mean that you're allowed to carry in there. You're not allowed to carry in there. Yisera the Shabbos the Sukkah al shel Sukkah. That on Shabbos of Sukkos, Shabbos is more stringent than the Sukkah, than the halachos of Sukkah. That even though 2 and a tefach works to be yotzei, your chiyuv of eating and sleeping and whatever in the Sukkah, you won't be able to carry in there more than Dalet Amos because the halachos of Shabbos, of Otzah, still apply. That is what, and therefore we don't say migo. Right? V'lo amrinon migo. And that's Abai's Kasha and Rabbi says, you see, we don't say migo. We don't say that since 2 and a tefach works for Sukkah, so then Memele it works also on Shabbos Sukkah and you can carry in the Sukkah. Says Abai, no, the Brisa says that Shabbos is more stringent than Sukkah and that even though it's a kosher Sukkah, you can't carry in it. Lo. Rabba argues back and he says, no. Yisera Shabbos de Alma al Shabbos de Sukkah. No. Shabbos in general is more stringent than Shabbos Sukkos, where we're more lenient. Meaning on Shabbos in general, 2 and a tefach, no way Jose, would not be considered a Rishus HaYachid. You'd have to have a proper wall. However, on Shabbos of Sukkos, says Rabbah, 2 and a tefach is a good wall because we say migo. Because we say that since it's a good wall for the Sukkah, it's a good, it's a kosher Sukkah, it's also Memele Rishus HaYachid for Shabbos. And so it says Rabbah, what it means is that Shabbos is more stringent. Shabbos in general is more stringent than Shabbos of Sukkos. Because Shabbos in general, 2 and a tefach would not be acceptable, whereas on Shabbos Sukkos, 2 and a tefach taka is acceptable, migo, since it's a kosher Sukkah, Memele it's a Rishus HaYachid for Shabbos, and you can carry in your Sukkah. Responds Abai, fact Abai, ihachi. If that's the case, Lema, Nami, then fact Abaye, well then the Brisa should also say another thing. The Brisa should also say, and that Yisera Sukkah de Alma as Sukkah de Shabbos. That the Sukkah during the week is more stringent than a Sukkah on Shabbos. The Ilu Sukkah de Alma boya tefach shochek, that we had said earlier, that if you have a Mavri Amefulash, so in order to be able to make that a kosher Sukkah, you're going to have to, right, if you have a wall on this side and a wall on that side, in order to make it a kosher Sukkah, you're going to have a tefach, right? The third wall is going to have to be at least a tefach, whereas the Ilu Sukkah de Shabbos, lo ba'ya tefach, whereas on Shabbos Sukkos, lo ba'ya tefach shochik v'sagi b'lechi. It would be enough for a lechi, meaning, so a lechi, as we learned to Masechta Eruvin, could be any amount, could be a kolshu, could be any amount. And therefore, when you have a mavui, then a lechi, any amount of a lechi is enough to be a kosher lechi. And therefore, even though when you have, and therefore if you have this mavui with this lechi, so since it's a kosher lechi for Shabbos, so then if you put schach on top of it, it would also be a kosher sukkah. Kilu, it has 2 walls and it's got a lechi, so since the lechi is kosher for Shabbos, so memele, if you also put schach on it, it's also going to be a kosher sukkah. Whereas during the week, there's no concept of a lechi during the week. Lechi is for Shabbos, to carry on Shabbos. During the week, there's no concept of a lechi, and therefore you'd have to mamish have a tefach. And therefore, says Abai ihachi, if that's the case, then lesni nami yisera sukkah de alma sukkah de Shabbos, that sukkah during the week is more stringent than a sukkah on Shabbos. Dilu sukkah de alma ba'ya tefach, because the sukkah during the week is going to require a tefach shochik. V'ilu sukkah de Shabbos lo ba'ya tefach shochik. Whereas a sukkah on Shabbos doesn't require tefach v'sagi b'lechi. It's enough even if you just put a lechi that's any size. Da'atu da'amart, because you, Rabbah, said sikech agabe mavui sheish lo lechi kosher. That you, Rabbah, said that if you put schach on top of a mavui that has on it a lechi, even though the lechi is less than a tefach, it's kosher. And therefore, Rabbah, if you're going to say migo, if you're going to say that since a sukkah that's 2 and a tefach walls is kosher for Otzah legabe Rishus HaYachid on Shabbos, migo, since it's a kosher sukkah, memele it's kosher to carry on Shabbos, then say the same thing legabe the mavui, that on Shabbos, since the lechi is kosher for Shabbos, so then memele also we should say migo, that it's also going to be migo, that it's good for Otzah Shabbos, for carrying on Shabbos because of the lechi. So memele it's also going to be a kosher sukkah for Shabbos of Sukkot, which means that then you should also say that sukkah in general is more chomer, is more strict than sukkah on Shabbos, because the sukkah during the week you require sort of a tefach for the third wall, whereas on Shabbos it's only a lechi. And meaning that just like when it comes to Shabbos, he's saying that Shabbos in general, Shabbos de Alma is more stringent than Shabbos on Sukkot, that on Shabbos in general you have to have 3 proper walls, whereas on Shabbos and Sukkot you only need to have 2 and a tefach. So you should also say that sukkah in general as well is more stringent than sukkah on Shabbos, because sukkah in general you would have to have a tefach for a third wall, whereas on Shabbos you could theoretically just get away with a lechi. So therefore Abai's kasha on Rabbah is that if you're going to say this migo, if you're going to say that since this 2 and a tefach wall is kosher on Shabbos, for sukkah, therefore memele is kosher on Shabbos, and therefore when the Brisa says that Shabbos is more stringent than sukkah, it means that Shabbos in general is more stringent than Shabbos on Sukkot. Well, then it should also say that Sukkah in general is more stringent than Sukkah on Shabbos, because Sukkah on Shabbos all it needs is a lechi, whereas Sukkah in general needs a tefach. But it doesn't say that, and therefore Abai wants to argue that it's not, that when the Mishnah says that Shabbos is more stringent than Sukkot, it's not talking about Shabbos in general, it's talking about Shabbos Sukkot is more stringent than the Sukkah itself. That is right, because Shabbos you need 3 proper walls, whereas Sukkah 2 and a tefach is enough, but it wouldn't be enough for carrying on Shabbos, according to Abaye. To which Rabba answers, Ahulo it's 3 chale. Rabba says, no, the Brisa doesn't need to teach me that if I can put schach on top of a mavui with a lechi on Shabbos, I'm sorry, that if I can put, if the lechi is kosher for carrying on Shabbos, to say that I can also put a schach on top of it and make it into a sukkah, and therefore sukkah during the week is more stringent than sukkah on Shabbos, because because if we're going to say migo from something that's lenient to something that's stringent, meaning that since I can, since the 2 and a tefach walls are kosher for sukkah, then they're also kosher for Shabbos, and I can mamish carry in my sukkah with 2 and a tefach walls, that we're going from lenient to stringent, and we're saying that since it is, that since 2 and a tefach works for a sukkah, which is a more lenient case, I can even carry now in my sukkah on Shabbos, which is a more stringent case. So then, mi chamirta lekilta lo kol sheken, well then certainly, memele, if I can carry in a mavur that has this lechi on Shabbos, which is a more stringent case, then memele, it will be a kosher sukkah, and I don't need to go into that in the Brisa. And now, therefore, Rabbah says the Brisa didn't need to go into that case, because once it established that when you have a kosher sukkah, it's kosher for Rishus HaYachid for Shabbos, so then memele, when I have something that's kosher for Rishus HaYachid on Shabbos, I know it'll be kosher to put schach on it, and I don't need to go into that. Gufa, we said earlier, Amar Rabbah said, Rabbah sikeh chagav mavui sheish lo lechi kshera, that if you put schach on top of a mavui that has a lechi on it, it's a kosher sukkah. The Amar Rabbah, and Rabbah also said, sikeh chagabe pasei beiraos kshera. Rabbah also says that if you put schach on top of pasei beiraos, who remembers what pasei beiraos are? Pasei beiraos are that when the Yidden would be traveling to be Ola Regel, so there would be like wells. They would have like wells along the way, and a well of course is Rishus HaYachid, but you're standing outside of Rishus HaRabim. So how can you draw out water on Shabbos? So what they would have is, they would have these diomdin, these like L-shaped things in all 4 corners, going, right, each one going in an amma. So an amma in this direction, amma in that direction, you have these L shapes. And then, since there's shem dalad mechitzas, since there's sort of, it's, the outlines of 4 mechitzas, even though it's paras mubala omid, it's considered acceptable, and you could draw water from the well into the area within this diomdin. And we're saying that since it's considered a Rishus HaYachid for Shabbos, you can also put tzchach on it and use it as a sukkah. V'tzricha, and we need both cases. The Ashmu'in and Mavui, Mishum de'ika shtei defanis ma'al yisa. Because if we would only say that you could put tzchach on top of a Mavui, I'll say, well, because at least a Mavui has two proper walls on either side. But by Pasei Beros, where there isn't even any one wall that's kosher. So, right, it's just L shapes. There's no kosher wall. So, if I put schach on top of the Pasei Beros, I might think that it's not kosher because it's not a proper, there's not even one proper wall. And if Rab would only say that you're allowed to put schach on top of Pasei Beros, Mishum de'ika shem arba defanus, because at least there's the shem arba defanus, there's the outline, the indication of four walls. There's L-shaped brackets in all four corners, going in all four directions. But if you just put schach on top of a mavoi, where there's only really two walls, and then like a lechi, so I might think that it doesn't work. So therefore, he had to teach both of those cases. And if you would only teach these two cases of the mavoi and of the Pasei Beros, but you didn't say that on that on Shabbos of Sukkot you can the sukkah that's 2 and a tefach walls is also considered a Rishus HaYachid on Shabbos. So v'yashminu hani tarte, if you would only say the mavoi amafulash and the Pasei Beros mechamirta lekilta, that's because that's going from a stringent thing, right? Meaning it's right to a more lenient thing, right? It's something that is mutter for otzah on Shabbos, right? The mavoi, the Pasei Beros. So we're saying on Shabbos it's allowed, so memela it should be allowed on for a sukkah. Whereas aval mekilta lechamirta emaloi tzricha. But from a lenient to a stringent, i.e., from to say that, if it's 2 and a tefach is kosher for sukkah, to say that therefore I'm allowed to carry it on Shabbos, I wouldn't necessarily take that plunge, and therefore I need a rabbi to teach that case as well. Oh, so now the Mishnah continues that if there is more sun than shade in the sukkah, right? The Mishnah had said that if the sukkah has more sun than shade, it's a problem. That when the Tanakama says that when we say that if there's too much sun, then it's a problem, it means that if there's too much sun with the schach, meaning if there's not enough schach lemaisa, right? There's not enough schach, so therefore too much sun comes in, right? But if there's, if the walls have, there's sunlight coming through the walls, I don't know, maybe you make these special loved walls or something with reeds that are, a little bit less than 3 tefachim away from each other. If sunlight is coming through the walls, it's not a big deal. Rabbi Yosha Omer af machmas tfanos. Rabbi Yosha says even the walls have to have more wall than sun. Omer Rabbi Yema bar Shlamya mishmei da'abai my time to Rabbi Yosha. Says Rabbi Yema bar Shlamya, what's pshat with Rabbi Yosha? Why does he say that the walls also have to be more wall than sun? The puzzle says v'sakosa la'aron es haproches, that you're going to cover the aron with the paroches. Paroches mechitza. The paroches, right, the curtain separating the aron, right, the kodesh and the kodesh HaKodashim, so is a mechitza. It's a wall. V'kakai rachman eschocha. And yet it's calling it schach. Alma, mechitza kischach bo'inu. So therefore we see that a mechitza has to be like schach. And therefore just like the schach has to be right, silas and mubim mechamasa, so also the wall has to be azoi, has to be like that. Rabbanan say no, all that means is just that you have to bend over the paroches a little bit so that it should be like schach, but it doesn't mean that the schach, that the wall has to be like schach. Alright. Abaye says Abaye Rebbe, Rabbi Yosha, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, and all of those Tanoim hold that a sukkah needs to be a permanent dwelling. Let's read that again. That Rebbe and Rabbi Yosha, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Gamliel, Beishamai, Rabbi Eliezer, and Acherim, which is Rabbi Meir, they all say that a sukkah needs to be a diras keva, a fixed structure. Not a temporary, a permanent dwelling. Rebbe, how do we know that Rebbe holds this? Titania, as we learned in the Brisa, Rebbe Omer, Kol Sukkah she'en ba'arba amis, adalit amis, psula. The Rebbe says that a sukkah needs to be at least 4 amis by 4 amis. So that's big enough, it's significant enough that it needs to be permanent. Okay? Rabbi Yoshia hada amarin, Rabbi Yoshia, that which we said, that the walls have to be proper. Rabbi Yehuda ditnan sukkah shigavol l'mayla me'esim ama psula. Rabbi Yehuda machsha, as we learned that in the first Mishnah, that if a sukkah is taller than 20 amas, it's too tall. Rava explained over there, because then it's a davka diras keva, and we need a diras sarai. But Rabbi Yehuda says no, it can be taller than 20 amas. So we see that Rabbi Yehuda holds that a sukkah is a diras keva, a permanent, a fixed structure. Rabbi Shimon, the Tanya, as we learned in the Brisa, beis kilchosim v'gimel afilu tefach, as we learned, I think it was yesterday, that the Tanakama holds that a sukkah is 2 walls, 2 in a tefach walls, whereas for Rabbi Shimon Omer, gimel kilchosim v'dalet afilu tefach, whereas Rabbi Shimon says, no, there are 3 walls, and the 4th one can be a tefach. And we saw that, who explained? Rav Masna, I think, says that, what's pshat with Rabbi Shimon? That he says that because the sukkah has to provide protection from rain, it has to be and from winds, and it has to be a proper permanent structure. Rabbi Gamliel, the Tanya, Rabbi Gamliel, as we learned in a Brisa, also sukkah brosha agala or brosha sfina, that if you have a sukkah on top of a wagon or on top of a boat, Rabbi Gamliel posa, Rabbi Kiva machsha, Rabbi Gamliel says it's possible. Rabbi Kiva says it's kosher. So we see that Rabbi Gamliel doesn't want you making a sukkah on top of a wagon or on top of a boat. It has to be a permanent structure. Beishamai, the Tanan, and Beishamai, as we learned in the Mishnah, Mishai Roshav Ruba Besukkah V'Shulchan B'Sochabayis, Beishamai posted that if a fellow has his head and most of his body in the sukkah, but his table in his house, it's no good, because we need, right? They say you need Roshav Ruba V'Shulchan, because it has to be a big enough, usable, proper space. Rabbi Eliezer, the Tanan, Rabbi Eliezer, as we learned in the Mishnah, also Sukkah K'min Tzrif. If a fellow makes a sukkah like a hut, or right, he just makes it like like a round hut that like the people who would like guard the fields would sleep in. Or samcha lekosel, or that you just take like a mat and lean it against the wall. That's not a good kos. That's not a good sukkah. Rabbi Eliezer posel, it says no good lefishein lagag, because there's no roof, right? That's not something that's not a place that take like a mat and lean it against the wall. It's not a place where somebody's going to want to live. The Chacham say it's okay. Acherim, how do you know that that Acherim say that you need to have a proper sukkah, a keva, tiras keva? The Tanya, is we learn in the Brisa, Acherim sukkah asuri keshovach psula v'shein lazavius. Says Acherim that a sukkah that's made like a dove coat or something, it's round, it's circular. It's not a good sukkah because it doesn't have any corners. I guess you're going to want to live in a house that has like corners, I guess, and not a round house, I guess. I don't know. Round house. Okay. So if it's just like circular sukkah, says Acherim, then taka wouldn't be a good sukkah, because, and therefore we want to say that means that he holds that you have to have a diras keva cheva. That was Daf Zayin of Masechta Sukkah. That was, not the easiest daf, not the easiest daf. Shtikol Chazara. Erevin kind of daf, right? Erevin, Shabbos, all sorts of those kinds of things. So the daf began talking about this third wall, right? We said that a sukkah has to be 2 walls and a tefach. So this tefach, where is it? So Rav had said, also we said that Shmuel had said that you take this tefach and you just attach it to like the third wall, but it's the third wall, but it just needs to be a tefach. That's it. Whereas Rav Asi and Rav Kana said, no, taka, you actually put it on like an angle, almost like on a diagonal. That's what you would do. Then we had the interesting opinion of Rav Simon, who says that actually you put this tefach wall within 3 tefachim of the other wall, so that using lavud, it'll actually be 4 tefachim, which is the majority of the 7 tefach regular wall. So that's that. We said that if you have a mavaya mefulash, basically an open mavur, you have a wall on one side and then opposite there's another wall. If you just take a tefach, so that could work for to be a third wall. Says Rabbi Simon and then Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that actually that it would have to be a 4 and a little bit tefach wide wall. Put it within 3 tefachim of the third wall of like one of the mavur walls, and then you have essentially a proper 7 tefach wall. Rava mentioned that maybe you should even make it into a tzuras HaPesach. There were 3 opinions. Maybe you have to make it a tzuras HaPesach, or maybe you can make it a tzuras HaPesach, or maybe in addition to Rabbi Simon, you also have to make it into tzuras HaPesach. So, and that was that this third wall. right? Meaning, if you have two proper walls and you want to make a third wall, so it has to have a tzuras of Pesach. Well, three options for Rava. And then we discussed the machlokas between Abaye and Rabba about is a sukkah that has 2 and a tefach walls, which generally on Shabbos would not be a proper Rosh Hashanah. Do we say that since it's a kosher sukkah, it's also a Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos? Rabba says yes. Abaye has a hard time with it. He says no. Rabba has some interesting opinions that he says that a mavayam, a fulash, if you have a lechi over there, we say since you can carry in there, it also makes it a kosher sukkah. Also, he says that if you put schach on top of pasei beiros, on top of the diomdim around the well, so that would also be a kosher sukkah. And then we saw the machlokas between the Chacham and Rabbi Yoshia about if there's light coming through the walls. Is that a problem or not? The Chacham say no, it's not. The only important thing is the schach. Rabbi Yoshia says no, even the walls are important. Also, you can't have too much light coming through the walls. And then we saw at the end that there was a whole bunch of Tanaim who hold that you actually subscribe to the opinion that a sukkah needs to be a diras keva, a proper structure. Chevre, that was Daf Zayin, shtickle complex daf, Erevini daf. I hope you have a great day. Cheers.